Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 753 for the 12th of March, 2023. Richard Saunders coming to you this week from not far from San Francisco. Coming up on this week's show, an oldie but a goodie, Nostradamus. Large parts of this show are dedicated towards Nostradamus, for many reasons, as you'll hear in the show. But for me personally, it's interesting because in 1979, I'd never heard of Nostradamus. Most of the people I knew had never heard of Nostradamus until a TV special came along, a so-called documentary, which to a kid seemed creditable. Now, of course, since then, and especially thanks to people like James Randi who have done excellent work in researching Nostradamus, we know now that he really couldn't look into the future. What's interesting is to discover why people think he could look into the future. We're going to start off this week's show with a book review. Well, a review of a newspaper ad and the book from 1983 about the so-called lost prophecies of Nostradamus. Then we're going to look at the very TV special I talked about, the Prophecies of Nostradamus from 1979. It caused quite a stir at the time. Also on this week's episode, it's Adrienne Hill with the Australian Skeptics Newsletter, collated by Tim Mendham. And in the Trove segment, it's back to look at Nostradamus, how Nostradamus has been reported in the Australian media over the decades. So no matter where you are around the world, maybe you're enjoying a few days getaway in a nice big fluffy dressing gown. Maybe you are all in the car. Hello to you in the back seat. No matter what you're doing, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have that coffee. No sugar. I cut out sugar in coffee about 20 years ago, just bit by bit. And now if I ever have a sweetened coffee, it tastes pretty strange. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. One of my favorite stores I like to visit in the San Francisco area is in fact in Berkeley. In the city of Berkeley, it's called Half Price Books, and people in the area will know of it. It's a bit of an institution. It's on Shattuck Street, and it is a wonderland of books. It's really nice in this day and age to still be able to visit a bookstore, and I've been visiting this bookstore for about 20 years, I guess. And they have a section, an alcove in there, dealing with metaphysical. So it's full of books about psychics and water divining and tarot cards, and it's, dare I say, it's a bit of a treasure trove of that sort of thing. A couple of weeks ago, I was in there thumbing through one of the books, happened to be about Nostradamus. And as I was looking, out fell onto the floor a folded up newspaper page from 1983 from The Star. Not exactly sure what The Star was, but it was The Star. December 27th, 1983, page 29, a full page ad. Major events of the future revealed. New revelations of Nostradamus. The Second Coming, the Antichrist, UFOs, and Armageddon. I guess they all go together. An exclusive historical first, his unpublished prophecies. Well, this sounds pretty intriguing. So I have a copy of the clipping here in front of me, and it's quite dramatic with a big bold print and some diagrams, a sort of amateurish sort of portrait of somebody who I guess could be Nostradamus? Anyway, let's read this blurb, this full-page ad from almost 40 years ago. Nostradamus is credited with being the greatest prophet of modern, non-biblical times. His uncanny in-depth forecasts are considered to be highly accurate. Nostradamus, in the 16th century, predicted both world wars, aerial battles, submarine attacks, Hitler's aggressions, and escape, as well as the assassination of both Kennedys. The seer warned the world of the coming of the atomic bomb. He wrote of space flights and about the rise and fall of Russia. In one of his most amazing predictions, he revealed how Iran would be taken over by a religious fanatic, writing the following in rhymed quatrains. Revolution, famine, war will not stop Persia, now Iran. Religious fanaticism will betray the monarch, the Shah, of which the end will begin in Gaul, France. Everybody knows that the Ayatollah Khomeini started his revolution while exiled in France. For the future, Nostradamus predicts that there will be a war in the Middle East in the next 5 years, during which the big powers will intervene. He even talks of the coming of the Antichrist and how the United States and Russia will combine forces, if only for a brief period. He also speaks of a religious war and the Vatican's having to move the tomb of St. Peter to a safe place. But perhaps the most astonishing of all is the fact that Nostradamus saw his own death in time to help the funeral arrangements. And now in big, bold type it says, was he a wizard, a servant of God, a super psychic, a devil worshipper, or a being from another planet? What a selection. The most mysterious man who ever lived. Legend has it that celestial activity was extremely powerful for several nights before the birth of Nostradamus. Reports of bright, round objects in the sky over Saint-Rémy de Provence are recorded in the archives at Salon. Nostradamus' birth was rather remarkable because Blanche Nostradam, the family's real name, presented her husband with a perfect baby. In the 16th century, perfect babies were almost unheard of. The mortality rate was very high. He had an incredible intellect. He was very young when he mastered several languages and advanced math. He became a licensed physician at 23. He walked among plague victims for months without catching the dread disease. With a strange mixture of herbs and ingredients unknown to the world, he was able to cure many of the afflicted, thus becoming known throughout Europe as a miracle healer. In his day, Nostradamus made friends with kings and queens who were impressed by his ability to see into the future. Royalty came far and wide to be in his presence. So anxious were they to know what the stars had in store for them. Many were disappointed, as Nostradamus knew well in advance about beheadings, revolutions, and the unfaithfulness that abounded among society's most prominent figures. The second coming and the Antichrist. Though Nostradamus considered himself an expert astrologer, he studied the stars in a totally unique way. He used a special device when scribing. The device was basically a magic wand which he used in conjunction with a tripod of flames and a bowl of water. Nostradamus also considered himself a very religious person, and while he was born a Jew, he later converted to the Catholic faith, utilizing mystical elements from both practices in his work. Many of his predictions dealt with the second coming and the appearance of the Antichrist. There are some who maintain that Nostradamus was a direct messenger of God and that his predictions were divinely inspired. To give credence to this claim, the French seer was once introduced to a young Franciscan friar, a poor village lad, and upon meeting the youth, dropped to his knees. Asked why he had done so, Nostradamus declared, "Because I must bow and kneel before His Holiness." Years later, this youth became the Pope under the title of Sixtus V. Others believe that Nostradamus was a time traveller from the future, or perhaps a being from another planet. All these theories are explored in detail. And incidentally, at the bottom of the page are a couple of diagrams, one of the classical profile of Jesus Christ as depicted in paintings with the clipped beard and the long hair, and the other one is Adolf Hitler at some sort of a rally with a swastika and lightning and skulls and fire, and what appears to be a huge explosion, possibly an atom bomb behind him. Nostradamus Unpublished Quatrains. A curious manuscript has been making the rounds of Europe, where books on Nostradamus have been frequent bestsellers in recent months. Up till now, none of this material has been released in the United States. Shortly before his death, Nostradamus apparently penned a series of prophecies so startling that he never had them included in any of his published works, supposedly because he was afraid of the effect they might have. These predictions were circulated only to royalty and were thought destroyed for many years until they were uncovered, hidden in the basement of the house where Nostradamus died. The title of this newly discovered manuscript reads Century 12, number 63. The seer's last supposed quatrain published was Century 12, number 62. The assumption is that Nostradamus wrote more than 12 centuries, but had not wanted these predictions to be widely read. As far as best can be determined, there are a total of 21 or more pages to his original prophecies that have only now been translated and interpreted. These are just a few of the provocative subjects dealt with in this new material. The reappearance of Jesus to the world. Mysterious wonders in the sky turn out to be a friendly invasion of alien beings from other worlds in space. Rare knowledge which will lead to the elimination of disease and sickness. New inventions far superior to anything currently in use on this planet. A terrible war in space. The time when night becomes day. The destruction of the Catholic Church and the last Pope. The great earthquake which will kill many. Riots in the streets of many cities. Gold missing from Fort Knox. Indeed, no prophet has ever lived who knew more about the future than did Nostradamus. With the world's current state of affairs, mountains, international tensions, and the realization that these are the last days the Bible speaks of, you cannot afford to miss reading Nostradamus, Untold Story, his unpublished predictions. Not sold in bookstores. Order using the coupon below. And then the next little box on the page in big title says, Black Prophecies. Dare you read Nostradamus' Black Prophecies, so devastating they were supposed to be sealed for all time? And the little diagram here is of an envelope with a black seal. Because of the traumatic nature of certain of his predictions, we are sealing them inside a special envelope which will be included with your copy of this amazing book. If you feel you cannot take these startling revelations, we suggest that you put this envelope aside unopened. These so-called black prophecies deal with the actual date that the world will come to an end and the events leading up to the physical transformation of the earth. And right at the bottom of the page, send payment to Inner Light Publications, P.O. Box 753, New Brunswick, New Jersey, 08903. Please send me, and there's a little line so you can fill out how many copies you want, copies of Nostradamus Untold Story, his unpublished prophecies, for which I am enclosing payment of $9.95 plus $1 toward postage and handling, $10.95. I understand that if I order now, I will receive free of charge Nostradamus Black Prophecies, which will be in a separate sealed envelope, as well as the magical wand of Nostradamus. If I am not satisfied with my purchase, I may return the book and wand within 30 days for a full refund. Note, Canadian and foreign customers must add $3, payable in US funds via postal money order or check drawn on a US bank. Allow 6 weeks for delivery. New Jersey residents add 6% sales tax. Well, with such an amazing full-page ad all the way back there 40 years ago, roughly, almost 40 years ago, I had to buy the book. Now, I thought it would be a bit silly writing to the address and sending in a coupon after all these years, but I did go on Amazon, or I Googled around, and I found the book. I found a copy of the book, which I had delivered for about $5. $5. And I have it right here, the Untold Story, Nostradamus Unpublished Prophecies. The sad thing is, I must admit, the sealed envelope did not come with it. I don't have that. However, all is not lost, because in the back of the book is a section called Nostradamus Unpublished Quatrains. So I guess they were included maybe in a second printing or something like that. And it's just a little larger than A4, the paper size, I guess. It goes to 68 pages, and it's full of large typewriter-typed pages. I'm not sure, from all those years ago, possibly computer. And, well, basic drawings, like somebody who's not really an artist has done the drawings, and they look very dramatic with dragons and, what's this, the Antichrist 666, somebody holding a little stick with 666 written across their face, and they seem to be battling cartoon dragons. It's a bit strange. But let's look briefly at some of what this book has to say. Incidentally, before we even get into the book, on the inside front cover, there are ads for other things. Journey to Dimensions Never Before Experienced, Brad Steiger, Altered States Awareness Tapes. And these tapes include such things as The Healing Light, Good Health Through Color Therapy. Haven't heard about color therapy for a long time. Cosmic Vision Quest, Using Dreams to Shape a More Positive Life, Experience Past Life Recall, Become a Spiritual Alchemist, Creating a Close Encounter and ET Situation. I wonder what an ET situation is. Past Lives Through Soul Contact, Creating a Positive Approach to Life's Problems, Discovering Your Spiritual Teacher, The Divine Fire, Exploring Future Lives. Exploring Future Lives. And the Star Birth Odyssey with Francis Pascal Steiger, double tape, length 120 minutes. Oh boy, that would be something, wouldn't it? Anyway, to get into the book itself, we've got a lot of going over published prophecies, which James Randi certainly points out in his book, which I recommend, The Mask of Nostradamus, are largely due to the fact that they have been very, what shall we say, they've been translated in a very cavalier fashion, not very accurately, and translated with an eye to making them fit past events, to make them look like they were predicting those events which were in the future of the time, or past events to us. The book has an ISBN, Nostradamus Unpublished Prophecies, copyright 1983, Inner Light, P.O. Box 753, New Brunswick, New Jersey. And the first page here basically repeats what the full-page ad says, goes into more detail about his early life and so on and so on and so on, and claims like, as said before, he walked among plague victims for months without contracting the dread disease. So, I mean, a lot of bolstering of any reputation or legends he might have had. There's a paragraph here that says, this only leaves two other possibilities. A, that he was a time traveler, or B, he was placed on Earth by alien beings and actually came from the stars. Now, the third possibility is C, none of the above, of course. But apart from that, the book just goes on at length, covering some of the more well-known prophecies that have been looked at over the years. And again, a lot of these simply have been interpreted incorrectly or interpreted favorably. On page 36, we find a very interesting prophecy here. It's one of the few times Nostradamus actually mentioned a year. And the quatrain is, in the year 1999 and 7 months, from the sky will come the great king of terror. He will bring back to life the great king of the Mongols. Before and after, war reigns happily. Now, this was used, and I've seen it again and again over the years, before the date, obviously, as a warning, or this is going to happen, or people looking into it. And of course, the date came and went and nothing happened. Nothing happened. And so it's typical of this sort of thing. When nothing happens, it's soon forgotten. Sort of swept under the carpet. It's like when a religious cult says the end of the world is coming on this day. The day comes and goes and nothing happens, and well, it's sort of forgotten or excused or explained away or something like that. Anyway, this book goes on about aliens coming, and Nostradamus saw this. Another one here is, the author claims there will be an ice age in the United States. Also, there'll be earthquakes and war from outer space. An interesting passage here. The author seems to interpret one quatrain as being a riot and looting at Fort Knox. Maybe he saw Goldfinger. Maybe Nostradamus was actually watching Goldfinger in the future. Who knows? But I'm sure you, like me, are keen to look at some of the unpublished quatrains as mentioned. And we get to the back of the book. A curious manuscript has been making the rounds of Europe, where books on Nostradamus are frequent bestsellers. And it just repeats the claim that Nostradamus wrote more. And part of these, or some of these, deal with the second coming of Jesus Christ. In the millennium, too, the king's son, before the turn, is seen by all amid thunderclaps. Angry, the rubble of war and pestilence, the sins. The fish returns to power after a long sleep. Make of that what you will, but the author is indicating that, as he says here, as we see Nostradamus meaning, Christ will return just before the turn of the second millennium, which is the year 2000. The king's son, of course, is Jesus. He will come out of the sky during a heavy thunderstorm, maybe ducking the weather, and will be seen by everyone on earth. Again, these things come and go, and nothing happens. The author here talks about space visitors and UFOs, a rash of stigmatas. That would be interesting. And once again, the author refers to the year 1999, claiming that when the 27-year war breaks out in 1999, there will be eclipses which will darken the earth. So, let me see, 27-year war in 1999. Well, take heart, everybody. The war's only got a couple of years left to run. This book is heading for my skeptical archives, but it's a classic example of people running away with their imagination, more or less, looking at quatrains they think are more or less translated correctly, looking into them, seeing what they want to see, and retrofitting history to make it sort of fit these prophecies, and then claiming, of course, the prophecies were right all the time. And referring once again to James Randi and the Mask of Nostradamus, a must-read for anybody interested in the topic. Randi makes it painfully clear, and obviously clear, Nostradamus did not have mystical insight to future events. And on the very last page, the back cover of this book, we have another ad here. Mystical Secrets of the Ages Revealed. Learn how to turn an ordinary glass of drinking water and an inexpensive crystal into a powerful elixir for improved good health, enhanced psychic abilities, and the fortification of inner strength. Famed Hungarian-born psychic tells you which crystals, gems, and stones are best suited for your needs. The Untold Story, Nostradamus Unpublished Prophecies. Again, another gem for the skeptical archives. And after the break, we'll take a brief look at the 1979 TV special in Australia, The Prophecies of Nostradamus.
Richard, how do I get better at telling if people are lying?
It's really simple. What you need to do...
Are ghosts real?
Well, actually, funny you should ask that, because what I've
How
discovered...
do I improve my memory?
I've got this great trick.
Can you make me happier?
Okay, look. For answers to 1,000 questions about the incredible world of human behaviour and the psychology of everyday life, join me, psychologist Richard Wiseman...
And me, science journalist Marnie Chesterton...
on Richard Wiseman's On Your Mind, a new podcast from Podimo and Telltale.
Can I win the lottery?
Probably not.
In 1979, the 7 TV network in Australia produced a documentary called The Prophecies of Nostradamus. This documentary is well over an hour and a half long and was hosted by popular TV personality and singer John Waters. Over the years, I've worked on a few TV projects with John Waters, and he continues to perform around Australia to this day. It would be impractical to cover all the claims and predictions made in this documentary, but we can look at some to get a general idea of what this did and did not do. What it did, and did well, was to achieve high ratings for the network. It was a hit in its day and caused a run on the book The Prophecies of Nostradamus by Erica Cheatham, Corgi Books. Erica Cheatham also appears in the documentary as an expert. I seem to remember a copy of that book ending up in my house not too long after. What was lacking at the time was any real skeptical rebuttal. It could be that something was written in the press at the time by the way of a review, but I can't find it in the archives. Those were the days of only a few TV networks in Australia, so many people watched and believed what had been told to them. Me, as something like a 13-year-old kid, included. The documentary was made in such a way that its assertions, and there were many indeed, were presented as facts. And more assertions were built on the original assertions. It was sort of like a house of cards. It was on TV. It had scary images. It had scary music. It had pictures of war, of famine. It had warnings. I seem to remember a rumor going around at the time that this documentary could not be shown in the United States as it would cause too much panic. The producers must have been delighted. Here's a clip from the very opening of the show, which is a case in point of how myth was presented as fact, and it has to do with the skull of Nostradamus himself.
There was a legend that whoever drank from the skull of Nostradamus would inherit his incredible powers. But for 200 years, his grave remained undisturbed, because the legend also said that whoever did so would immediately die. One night, at the height of the French Revolution, 3 drunken soldiers set out to test the legend. It was not the skeleton that suddenly sobered the soldiers, but the plaque around its neck, with the date May 1791, which could only have been placed there at the time of burial in 1566. Nostradamus had predicted, 200 years before, the exact date when his body would be dug up.
Nostradamus. Nostradamus.
Non, Robert. Non. Non.
Oh non, mon grand-père, tu es stupide.
The shot that killed that soldier was fired from the riot of the surrounding revolution. A stray bullet, a freak accident that fulfilled the legend of Nostradamus. Nostradamus. What kind of a man was he, who predicted the date of the desecration of his own grave, whose predictions were used as propaganda during World War II? A man who has accurately predicted events over the last 400 years, from the French Revolution to the Kennedys, and on into the future, even to a Third World War, and eventually the total destruction of the world as we know it. What then are we to make of his predictions? If they're true of the past, what of the future? Tonight, we would like to introduce you to the Prophecies of Nostradamus.
A little research, easy in 2023 with access to the internet, shows us that this is but one version of the story. In another version of the story, the year is 1793. And in another version of the story, the soldier was killed by a sniper in an ambush the next day. Historians say that in the year 1700, city officials did move the body of Nostradamus to a sturdier and more prominent area. That, according to some versions of the legend, was when they looked inside the grave and saw a medallion saying 1700. It has all the hallmarks of a myth, with no solid evidence to show it really happened. But it does make for a good story. The point is that this unverified story or myth was presented as fact, something the 1979 documentary does again and again and again. The documentary covers many historical events and people, trying to make each one fit the writings of Nostradamus. Wars, revolutions, Napoleon, Hitler, Jack and Bobby Kennedy, and so on. But it also looks into what, at that time, was the future.
So now, the future. What does Nostradamus tell us will happen? Essentially, the prediction is war. A third world war that will be nuclear and far worse than all other wars put together.
One that shall cause the infernal gods of Hannibal to live again, the terror of mankind. Never more horror nor the papers tell of worse in the past. And in the last era, all the kingdoms of Christianity and also all unbelievers shall quake for the space of years, and there shall be more grievous wars and battles. Towns, cities, castles, and other buildings shall be burnt, desolated, and destroyed. Married women and widows ravished, sucking children dashed against the walls of towns, and so many evils shall be committed by the means of that infernal prince, Satan, that almost the entire world shall be undone and desolate.
So Nostradamus predicts the Third World War. What's so startling about that, you say? People have been predicting a third world war ever since the second one finished. All right. But Nostradamus, who wrote this 400 years ago, also gives us the year and the signs to look for. He tells us who will be fighting and why, and suggests there will be occurrences of unprecedented natural disasters such as floods, famine, and earthquakes, and tells us exactly when and where these events will take place. He assembles a powerful jigsaw puzzle, the eventual pattern of which cannot be denied. Remember, these warnings are not the opinions of the producers of this program, but interpretations of Nostradamus, based on facts available today. First we ask when, and although there are several hints left by Nostradamus, there are two which are quite clear and must be considered side by side. One, it could be as early as 1981, and the other stating quite clearly that the war will be well underway by 1999.
In the year 1999 and 7 months, from the sky will come the great king of terror. He will bring back to life the great king of the Mongols. Before and after, war reigns happily.
In 1989, the Seven Network produced a follow-up documentary, also starring John Waters. Needless to say, this was just as fanciful as the first, and repeated many of the predictions and events mentioned in the previous documentary. This is what Tim Mendham wrote about the 1989 follow-up documentary at the time.
Hi, my name's Tim Mendham. I'm the editor of Australian Skeptics magazine, The Skeptic, and Executive Officer for Australian Skeptics Inc. And today I'll be reading a short item from The Skeptic magazine, which was Volume 9, Number 3, roughly September 1989. And it's about a program that appeared on the 7 TV networks on August 27, 1989, titled Nostradamus, the Final Chapter. And it goes like this. What is it about the 7 network that makes it the bastion of pseudoscience on the TV medium? Apart from a scattering of programs on the other networks, Richard Neville's short-lived series on everything alternative on the 10 network being the most notable, 7 has given more promotion to the weird and wonderful world of just plain silliness than any other network. This latest addition to the genre was a continuation of a program shown 10 years ago, with little extra to justify the effort. Why anyone takes any notice of the supposed predictions of the 16th century seer is anyone's guess. Statements about the future based on his quatrains inevitably fail. The predicted destruction of California last year is an obvious example, last year being 1988. It is only when followers of Nostradamus look back on recent events and twist the various verses to fit that there seems to be any justification for any belief at all. In fact, this is what the producers of the show, Paul and Margaret Dane, said during the program. You must be scraping the barrel for experts when you have to interview yourself for your own program. This is like asking Paul Keating, the Prime Minister, to unbiasedly espouse the success of the government that he ran. There's no doubt that it's much easier to understand what he is talking about when you've got the benefit of hindsight, they said. Too true. If you can't make an accurate prediction before the event, then what good is a profit to anyone? Obviously, he's a lot of good to the producers. The previous program rated extremely highly. We'll wait for hindsight to predict the success of the second edition. And what of host John Waters? Everyone knows actors are experts on everything. Just look at Shirley MacLaine. Summary? Rubbish. And that's Tim Mendham reading from The Skeptic, Volume 9, Number 3, 1989.
James Randi once told me that predictions that only seem to make sense about past events are not much use at all as predictions. Watching the 1979 documentary and the 1989 documentary from the vantage point of 2023, it is also interesting when noting, as mentioned before, how they thought the future, the 1980s, the 1990s and so on, would play out according to how they interpreted Nostradamus. Wars, famine, pestilence, even the Pope, and so on. We don't need to retrofit or shoehorn to see how wrong they were. This documentary is important for us today. It is a lesson in how the media produce what is basically something just for entertainment, but in such a way that many will take it seriously. What was important in 1979 and in 2023 for a commercial TV network is ratings, not a rigorous examination of the facts. That would be too expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately pointless for them. In fact, the same network, Network 7, via one of their online lifestyle pages, was running a story in December 2022 about what Nostradamus predicted for 2023. You might need a stiff drink, but I encourage you to watch the documentary from 1979. It's free online at archive.org with a link in this week's show notes. Nostradamus' fame has come and gone and come and gone and come and gone. He was certainly famous in his own time, and even more so in the late 1970s, especially in Australia. His predictions or writings have been used again and again and again, interpreted again and again and again, and maybe more importantly, have been retrofitted again and again and again to make them seem to fit events of the past. Those who produce and publish insights into Nostradamus' predictions seem to have no problem in taking great liberties when it comes to their interpretation of what they think Nostradamus was saying, especially when making his writings fit past events. This is a game anyone can play, and they will be certainly playing this game for centuries to come. I wonder if Nostradamus could have foreseen that.
Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you can listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma and funny sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Canada. Happy to be back to read the highlights from the Australian Skeptics Newsletter. This is newsletter number 168. You can subscribe to this newsletter and get it delivered to your inbox every other week, complete with links to all of these stories. Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. But now, let's see what Tim Mendham has for us this week. Hi all, says Tim. Some stories just never die. Ivermectin as a treatment for COVID and 5G causing radiation poisoning will probably join the perennials, like psychics solving crimes. At least we will always have the more positive things, like looking for E.T. and your pets passing to heaven over a rainbow bridge. Not everything has to be nasty. Read on, Tim. Okay, Tim, I'll do just that. Surprise, surprise, ivermectin still useless against COVID-19. New research shows that even higher and longer doses of ivermectin are still useless in treating COVID-19. Nonetheless, some alternative physicians are pushing it to treat flu and respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV. 10-step guide to assessing conspiracy theory claims. This is an excellent article laying out key ways you can assess a conspiracy theory, initiated by an article on the so-called suspicious deaths of Canadian doctors. And I just have to add that yes, doctors in Canada do die despite our great healthcare system. And for some reason, they seem to love talking to me once I tell them I'm a skeptical activist. In fact, I went to a specialist this past summer who seemed really happy to be able to talk about possible and necessary medication options without me arguing that the medication is not natural. He also said he would listen to this podcast. And if you're listening, hello. The fall and rise of bioelectricity. This outlines the origins of Frankenstein, the dark ethics of electroshock technology, and the gruesome work of Galvani's nephew, Giovanni Aldani, following his uncle's work on revivification. It was never entirely possible to extricate Galvanism from its associations with woo and quackery and galvanic magic, but it probably led to more scientific treatments such as CPR and defibrillators, although in this case to the head rather than the chest. 5G microwave claim is well and truly cooked. This is a fact check on claims that people are exposed to more radiation from being near a 5G tower than being inside a microwave oven. Not that anyone actually goes inside a microwave oven. And as you can probably guess, surprisingly, it's not true. Psychics and crimes. This highlights a couple of recent examples of self-professed psychics involved in solving crimes. The body of a missing woman in the UK was apparently found by a psychic. He offers, quote, a huge thank you to Lancashire Police for their help, support, and the open-mindedness with which they dealt with us following our call. Spiritualists or mediums are obviously not something the police can come across every day, and I appreciate the respect given to us, end quote. He adds that, quote, I was not asked by the police or Nicola's family to become involved in this case, end quote. But we dare say he won't mind mentioning the fact that he found the woman's body. Meanwhile, a Polish girl's claims that she is missing English girl Madeleine McCann have sparked an outrage online, leading her to seek help from a Persian medium, Dr. Fia Johansson, who has reportedly helped the U.S. police on missing person cases. Meanwhile, a German clairvoyant, Michael Schneider, reckons he knows exactly where Madeleine is and that the Polish girl isn't her. He has apparently solved at least 25 missing person cases since he started aiding investigations on a voluntary basis in 2006. Neil deGrasse Tyson Tour. Noted skeptic and astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson will be touring Australia and New Zealand in July. Pre-booking tickets available from Think Inc. And I highly recommend seeing him. I think his talk at SciCon was one of the best I've ever seen. He's amazing. How to complain. Mandy Lee Noble gave an inspiring Zoom talk to Vic skeptics recently, titled, quote, Get Heard, Effective Healthcare Complaints, end quote, and about how to make complaints to regulators with a greater chance of success. You can view the video on the Vic Skeptics Facebook Skeptics Cafe page. Valet Richard Buchhorn, 1932 to 2022. We recently learned of the death of Richard Buchhorn, former priest, social justice campaigner, and latter-day skeptical activist. He was a member of the Queensland Skeptics Committee and organized their first water divining test. The challenger failed to prove his skills, and wrote articles for the Skeptic magazine, where he argued that there is no reliable evidence to support the urban legend that Aboriginal people in North Queensland practice cannibalism. Margaret Kitson, president of Queensland Skeptics, says that, quote, I continue to be amazed at the various different paths that people have taken on the journey towards skeptical activism, with Richard's definitely being a most unusual one, end quote. Our thoughts are with his family. The March 2023 issue of The Skeptic magazine will be out very soon, with a feature that responds to the regularly raised issue, Why Bother? Our response could be that the skeptical movement, whether that means Australian skeptics or the broader capital S skeptical community, has had significant successes, and it is always developing new ways and approaches to tune its approach. Not to mention the little matter of defending the truth. But it is always important to look for relevance, not to rest on any laurels, and to innovate in delivering the skeptical message. Apart from that, we look at ways psychics can fool you, a classic look at confronting Uri Geller and the controversial career of the most famous exorcist of the last 50 years. Meanwhile, you can read an article on the latest Hall of Shame as a sample from the December 2022 issue, another ongoing battle. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time to do so. You can sign up for a hard copy or digital version or both. The digital is offered free to those who take up the hard copy version. Contact the editor if you're not sure if your existing subscription needs renewing. Learn more about our magazine and subscribe now. Skeptics in Action. If you have any ideas for stories or want to contribute to Skeptics communications, such as the magazine or Facebook page, or just have something you want to get off your chest, then you're welcome to get in touch. News leads should be sent to newstips@skeptics.com.au. Submissions for the magazine, etc. should go to editor@skeptics.com.au. Comments and suggestions should also go to editor@skeptics.com.au. Items of interest. Mexican president posts photo of an elf. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador did not seem to be joking when he posted the photo of an alux, a mischievous woodland spirit in Mayan folklore. He wrote that the photo, quote, was taken 3 days ago by an engineer. It appears to be an alux, end quote. Adding, quote, everything is mystical, end quote. The nighttime photo shows a tree with a branch forming what looks like a halo of hair and what may be stars forming the figure's eyes. According to traditional Mayan belief, aluxes are small, mischievous creatures that inhabit forests and fields and are prone to playing tricks on people, like hiding things or photobombing. Soppiest story of the week. Psychic says dogs choose the time and place they will die. Psychic Nancy Mello from Connecticut, USA, believes animals choose when and where they are going to die, and some pets become guardian angels in heaven, while others reincarnate on Earth. Quote, each death is a beautifully orchestrated dance of waiting for their humans to be ready, or wanting to pass before the family goes on holiday. Some dogs want to pass by their favorite tree or with music on. Others would rather pass with assistance, end quote. Nancy has been able to talk to animals from a very young age and has learned about their afterlife from speaking to pets who have died. She says one of the greatest honors is, quote, helping animals cross over the Rainbow Bridge, end quote. Okay, now let's all together say, aww. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from a cold and snowy Calgary, who is looking forward to flying into the future next week to warm up in Sydney. Adrienne Hill here, and I'm really excited to announce I'm going to be heading to Sydney on March 14th, Canada time, and will be attending a Skeptics in the Pub on Thursday, March 23rd. Hopefully, I'll be over the jet lag by then, and I will be fully awake for my talk, which I have titled Skepticism and Syntax, Being a Wikipedia Guru with Giggles and Gumption. Join me to walk through my journey to becoming a skeptical activist, from my first behind-the-scenes work with the guerrilla skepticism on Wikipedia not-so-secret cabal to snickering on the Skeptic Zone podcast. Join me for discussions on haunted houses, medical pseudoscience, psychics, and silly stories. Giggling guaranteed. And that's at the Occidental Hotel on Thursday, March 23rd at 6 p.m. in Sydney. Details can be found at meetup.com/AUST Skeptics. Hope I see you there.
Now it's time once again to look into those pages at Trove. At trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource from the National Library of Australia and the Australian Government, for digitised newspapers, clippings, archives, recipes, who knows what, going back, indeed, centuries. And as a lot of today's episode is dedicated to Nostradamus, I thought we would see what we could find in these archives dealing with Nostradamus. And and I was surprised indeed to see how many references came up. Hundreds of references to Nostradamus over the many years. So let's just take a few, more or less picked at random. And the first one comes from the state of Queensland, the Balloon Beacon, dated the 21st of April, 1949. A war prophecy. Writings of Nostradamus. World War III begins this month, according to the Prophecies of Nostradamus. German astrologer Fritz Lang made the announcement at Frankfurt during the week after months of research into the writings of the 16th century seer. World War III will begin in Greece, says Lang, and will last 4 months. The West will win after an atom bomb has been dropped on the Kremlin. The last battle will be fought in the province of Westphalia in the British zone of Germany. When reporters pressed astrologer Lang for proof of his predictions, he quoted such Nostradamus writings as, "Fire, water, iron, and rope will unite against the red sex, while peace is being undermined. Those who start the war will die at once, except for one whom the world will try later." Nostradamus, real name Michel de Nostradamus, was a French astrologer and physician who died in 1560. He left behind a pile of cryptic, prophetic verses called centuries. The disciples of Nostradamus claimed that his verses foretold Cromwell, Napoleon, Hitler, Mussolini, and World War II. His detractors say his verses can be interpreted to mean anything after the event. And, of course, that's exactly what we find happens. And from the Canberra Times, dated the 4th of January 1973, Nostradamus wins. Nostradamus once again proved his superiority over stablemate... Oh, it's about a horse. Nostradamus the horse. Well, let's see how the horse did. His superiority over stablemate Castilia by defeating that horse in a flying handicap at Queanbeyan for the 3rd time this month. Both horses are prepared by Canberra trainer Rob O'Sullivan. At their previous encounters, Castilia has started favourite, but yesterday Nostradamus was backed into favouritism at 6-4 on and won by 3 lengths in a track record equalling time of 59 seconds for the 1,000 metres. There you are. Put your money on Nostradamus the horse. And now from the Advocate from Melbourne, Victoria, dated the 24th of July 1941. Prophecies of Nostradamus. The Prophecies of Nostradamus, 16th century astrologer, whose predictions have been the subject of a movie short, deserve no more credence than those of any other astrologer, which is zero. The University of Notre Dame Religious Bulletin declares in answer to the inquiries from students, quote, "It is quite possibly true that these prophecies were written by him," end quote. The bulletin says, quote, "His real name was Michel de Nostradamus, a Frenchman of Jewish descent living from 1503 to 1566. Astrology enjoyed a great vogue during his life. As court astrologer to Catherine de' Medici, he had great prestige. It is known also that, claiming the ability to read the distant future, he began to write his mystic prophecies. They are entitled to as much respect as fortunes told by tea leaves," end quote. And now from the Canberra Times, dated the 14th of November 1979, Nostradamus burgers with the lot. And this is in a column called Paspalum Place. The great fear I feel in connection with Nostradamus is not that his prophecies will come true, but that we are about to suffer a terrible Nostradamus cult. His prophecies to the effect that we are all going to turn to cannibalism and that there are going to be famines and massacres and autocracies and Australian democratic governments and wars do not agitate me at all. Almost all of these things are part of the life of our tormented globe already, and an Australian democratic government in Australia will be just another twist of the global thumbscrew. Alas, the superstitious nature of the labouring classes will guarantee that assorted fools and charlatans will reap enormous riches by saying that Nostradamus's ravings obviously indicate that your granny is going to chop the heads off all your goldfish and the hula hoop is to make a comeback, and that Kamal is to be the first Australian Pope. And incidentally, Kamal was a very popular singer-entertainer of the era. Other entrepreneurs, I prophesy, will dredge these silly works of the 16th century loon to see what he has to say about sex, cricket, and the rearing of children so that they can produce best-selling works like The Nostradamus Path to Better Orgasms. Improve your batting the Nostradamus way with a foreword by Colin Cowdrey. And Nostradamus on the prediction of nappy rash. One anticipates that there will be the Nostradamus t-shirts, Nostradamus deodorants, and sundry other products, and that fast food emporiums will sell us Nostradamus burgers. So someone there not exactly taking Nostradamus very seriously at all. And finally, we'll go all the way back to 1938 on the 28th of September in the Kadindra and Wallaroo Times in South Australia. Will it happen? 400-year-old prophecies. The fall of Hitler, an attempt by German ships to blockade London by sailing up the Thames, the end of the Spanish War in 1940, the invasion of France from the Pyrenees frontier, and a revolution in Britain. These are the predictions of a hermit astrologer 400 years ago, which are now being unearthed and interpreted by French scholars. Michel de Nostradamus, author of these visions and doctor to 3 French kings, was the most feared man in Europe. Nostradamus forecast the start of the Spanish Civil War. He tells us it will end in February 1930. On the start of the war, he wrote, "In 1936, the reign of Mars will begin south of Saint-Jean-de-Luz. An inhumane Spanish chief will arise and devastate the country. Refugees will flee from the Basque Country." Nostradamus has a shock for the Nazis. He says Hitler's fall will follow the discovery that the great German general's commander of the forces on the Austro-Czech border is on the side of the Soviet. Spaniards will devastate all southern France. Germany will go to war with France. Britain will at first refuse to join in, but German warships will sail up the Thames and we shall fight. But our decision will lead to, quote, bloody internal strife, end quote, a revolution which will be suppressed. Not until 1947, says Nostradamus, will peace be restored to a devastated Europe. Well, a little bit of a mixed bag of so-called prophecies and predictions there. So there you go, just a few, just a scant few of the hundreds of references I've discovered over the years to Nostradamus. A lot of them clustered around the late 1970s after that TV special went to air. Oh, Nostradamus, will we ever see the back of you? I don't think so. But you too can find out all sorts of interesting things about Nostradamus, or horses maybe, by visiting Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. Put in your search, and you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone at skepticzone.tv. Your micropayments or donations or monthly contributions mean the show keeps going. Now, I wonder how many of you listening in the audience in Australia anyway remember that 1979 Prophecies of Nostradamus with the scaring music. If I was Nostradamus, I could look into the future. What do I see? I see a long plane flight for me over the Pacific in the coming week. We'll see if that comes true. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the San Francisco Bay Area.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.